How much fat do you have to lose? Do you have a big chunk to lose? Are you someone who's looking at 20, 30, 40, 50, or even more pounds to be borderline stage ready? If that's the case, then I would largely say that, one day maybe working up to the bikini division, that could be something that you do. But realistically, if it's your first show, you might be better suited to do the fit model and even see like, hey, how much muscle do you actually have under body fat? How dense are you? And if you need to build a lot of density in order to be successful in the bikini division, well, then this is probably first going to start with getting to a body fat where you can really make that assessment in terms of muscularity. Now, what I've seen a lot of is individuals who really don't have that much body fat to lose. They have 5 to 10 pounds. And in this case, they very well could just do a very short mini cut and be ready for the fit model division. However, in the case that we're talking about the same athlete who maybe is 5 pounds or so off from fit model stage ready, the same person might have 15 to 20 pounds in order to truly be stage lean for the bikini division. And I would almost consider it like this. What is the cutoff? Like, how much fat could you actually tolerate losing before you just run yourself into the ground, before things become really unsustainable? I can tell you that I've gotten way too lean, like well past the point of bikini lean. And it was something that, like, quite literally by definition, unsustainable, not something that I would be able to do for any longer than the amount of time that I did. And I think it's important to kind of know this threshold, which is why, even though it was too lean for my shows, it was still like, okay, that is the point that if, let's say, hypothetically, I was doing a different division where I had to get leaner, I really wouldn't have had any more fat to give. Like, I wouldn't, maybe like physiologically, I would have been able to lose a little more fat, but like mentally, that was the point where it's like, I can't get any leaner. I just can't commit to that. Now, I can also tell you that there are athletes I've worked with who have struggled getting down to 17, 18% body fat, which realistically for the bikini division, you're probably looking at something closer to that 12, 13, maybe even 14%, depending on how much muscularity you have. So when we start really assessing like, what is the cutoff for you? I almost look at it like if you were to shed 20%, and I'll even say 15 to 20% of your total weight from beginning a prep to getting on stage, if that is an amount that you can tolerate, and let's say that amount is something you've done before seemingly pretty easily, then maybe there's an argument. Maybe that does make sense. And realistically, if you don't have a hard time losing fat, if you have a high propensity to burn fat readily easily, then this might not be a big deal. But I can tell you for me, losing 18%, 20%, that's really like the upper limit. And anything longer than that, and I don't really find it productive. I feel at that point that, you're probably starting off, and I'm speaking about myself at this point, I was starting off at a body fat that really wasn't conducive with me having a long, successful season. So kind of think about it this way. If there's a cutoff for you that you're like, hey, like I've lost 7 pounds before, and when I lost 10, it was like kind of crazy afterwards. Like I just wanted to eat everything in sight. And those last 3 weeks were really rough, like me getting the weight off. That could be an indication that maybe we need to pace this more appropriately. And in the case you're like, I want to get on stage, I want to see what it's like to actually compete. If that range at which you can tolerate that fat loss is a little closer to fit model, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think in actuality, you might find that, maybe this diet that's 5 to 7 pounds to get to a fit model physique, maybe that's a lot easier than you anticipated. And maybe you want to do that a few rounds and see, okay, get your feet wet. Maybe you do enjoy it. And perhaps you get to the point where you're like, yeah, you know what? I do think I want to make that crossover down the line and see how I fare in the bikini division. So really in the case of fat loss, the last thing I'll say is, how easy is it for you to actually lose fat? Now, it's understandable when you're not very experienced, when you haven't developed the skill of dieting, fat loss is going to be very uncomfortable. And there's no shame in that. I think it's something that as coaches and as, seasoned athletes, we should be more empathetic towards, is that like some people might not be as comfortable being in a deficit. And it is something, yes, you can work on and something you can get better at tolerating. You can also figure out like, what are the things in your life that are making this harder, and assuming that they're controllable. Like maybe you go out of your way to modify them and adjust it to make the diet said easier. But I'll say, and I'm thinking of a former client right now, this was someone that like really wanted to get on stage. And she told me out the gate, she's like, I have my eyes and my heart set on being a pro bikini competitor. She hadn't competed before. She told me, past issues she had with coaches, just regarding like the diet and feeling like it was too extreme, feeling like she wasn't getting, custom attention and programming. So, I took her on and I'm like, okay, like this will be something like, hopefully I can help educate her and teach her that like, there is a method to this madness. And like, truly, like, yes, it might be uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be nearly as extreme as, the past program that she was running. And what I found is that in the first 7 weeks, she really struggled, and it became apparent to me. I'm like, okay, this, even if like, the program is optimized and the deficit is reasonable, in this case, like she was in a very, very big inappropriate deficit. She started working with me. I put her in a 500 calorie deficit. Was very, again, empathetic to the fact that like she wasn't as experienced as other people I've worked with, but time and time again, she would check in. She wasn't completely adherent. I would offer corrections, offer actionables, tell her that like, hey, if you want to see fat loss come off, it might just take you being a little tougher and like toughing out some of this deficit, because ultimately that's what's driving the stall. That's what's driving the lack of progress. Of course, a few weeks in, she goes on a trip, she gains a lot of weight, comes back super discouraged. And I'm like, hey, like we've seen that the diet can work even to some extent, maybe not the extent you were hoping for. Let's just get back on track. Unfortunately, she came back with the realization. She's like, you know what? I haven't lost that much weight, and I probably have about 20 pounds to lose to get on stage. I think this is something that if I'm going to really commit to this long-term goal, this ambition to be a professional bikini competitor, I need to spend more time in less of a deficit and really distilling out what are the things that are making this hard for me. So even though in this case, like we were short of the initial goal of, I think it was like 10 or 12 pounds, we had only really lost like 6 at that point. And even though it was still some progress, it wasn't the progress that she wanted to make. And I think the fact that she was able to have this level of awareness and really step back and be like, okay, like this is that uncomfortable that if I keep trying to be in this heftier deficit, if I keep trying to aim for a pound lost each week, I'm just going to continue to discourage myself and ultimately set myself up for failure. Realistically, I've had other clients who are juggling a lot right now. They are not as lean as they want to be, but they're in school, they're working, they're married, they have kids, and frankly, the type of fat loss phase that they can commit to is not one that's going to allow them to get on stage soon enough. And if you're unfamiliar with like why I'm saying that, what that means, essentially what you have to understand is that dietary fatigue is going to accumulate whether or not you lose the weight. So this is why it can be kind of dangerous, and not so much in like you're going to break something, you're going to cause irreversible damage, but rather you're not going to see the progress that you want to see, yet you're going to be accruing a lot of fatigue and a lot of resentment towards the process of dieting. And it's also likely that your buy-in into the program itself is going to go down if there isn't something quite literally objective, whether that be scale weight, whether that be measurements, whether that be a DEXA scan, whether that be just seeing your clothes fitting better. If we're not seeing this objective progress in the magnitude that you need to see it, this is something for a lot of individuals can deter them and really make them lose belief in their ability to lose body fat. Now, kind of switching gears here, the other component to determining whether or not you should do the fit model division or the bikini division is really understanding how much muscle do you currently have. Is it, let's say, too much for the fit model division, or is it too little for the bikini division? And I'll say, for most people who have not trained for a bikini competition, just walking around very fit girls like the average fitness influencer, they're probably on the less muscled side relative to the standard for bikini. I see this happen all the time where individuals will come to me and they'll be like, yeah, you know what? I'm super bottom heavy. I have a lot of muscle in my lower body. It's my upper body that's struggling. And really what I see whenever I look at their pictures or I see their training videos, I'm like, it's not the fact that you have a ton of muscle, it's that there's most of your body fat being held in the lower body. And realistically, you're at a body fat that creates this very curvy, very aesthetically pleasing look. But if you were to cut down, if you were to lose all the body fat that's needed to have the right visibility of the tie-ins, you're actually going to be pretty wispy. You're not going to nearly have the density that you think you do. And I'll say, like, back in 2015, when that became, the look, the bikini look that was awarded then, which is now ironically what the fit model division is reminiscent of. I mean, like, I was 19, 20 competing, and I was told by several judges, like, hey, your quads are a little much, you need to bring up your glutes, but largely let's be careful about not being too developed. Whether or not I would have gotten judged down on muscularity or that would have actually hindered me, it's besides the point. Really what I'm trying to say is that I think a lot of people come into the sport of bodybuilding thinking that the bikini division is very slim, very toned, very tight. And yes, although it is all those things, realistically, it does require a level of muscularity that is pretty unfathomable for a lot of people and is not something that you're going to just accidentally wake up and be dense enough to win a regional bikini competition. Now, of course, there are outliers, but largely this is going to be a physique that takes anywhere from 1 to even 3 years, depending on your propensity to build muscle. And yes, I'm largely talking about the lower body here, but we really can't forget that the upper body also needs muscular development. And specifically for bikini, this is not a little bit of muscle. And this is really where you have to consider. For some people, they are very set on wanting to fit into their designer clothes. They don't want to have a new wardrobe from the rip. And realistically, this is something that, I've had to consider myself. If the bikini division were to continue to grow and the upper body were to continue to develop into something that is more dense, I don't know if I would continue to want to have that upper body. I don't know, like, realistically, I do feel very upper body heavy, and sure, like, having more glutes than lower body, that's going to balance that out. But I think it's something that realistically you kind of have to assess on your own, because yes, let's say you get on stage at 115 or 120, you're probably going to walk around minimally 10 pounds, maybe even 15. And for some of us, myself included, you might even walk around 20 pounds heavier than what you get on stage at. Now, again, some people, they might not even bat an eye and be like, yeah, I don't really care because I like the shape that I have. And, a little more body fat, that would be okay. But especially if you are someone who stores body fat in your upper body or stores body fat in your waist, this can be a real point of contention and can be something that a lot of women, they struggle with, because then they find that when they're a little bit heavier, which is absolutely necessary when you're not on stage, that can be a little too dense, a little too thick. And this is really where I see there being a benefit to the fit model division, because it's something like you can have muscle and you can have that, sort of hourglass shape, that very like fitness magazine look. But realistically, even if you gain 5 pounds, which like you don't necessarily have to gain as much weight when you compete in fit model, because the conditioning requirements aren't that of which they are in bikini, you're still going to hold close to the shape you have on stage. And that's where I see a lot of bigger competitors, and I mean like quite literally taller competitors, even professionals, who've come right out and been like, hey, like, to be competitive, I would have to build another 10, 15 pounds of muscle. And I'm already pushing 170 in my off season. This is uncomfortable. And realistically, I'd rather just size down and sculpt my body so that I fit more so in the fit model division. And that way I can have less of that fluctuation year round.